I gave him my keys because he's my brother. He sold my truck for $28,000, forged my signature, and disappeared. Part 1. Trust. I handed over my keys on a Tuesday morning, the sun just cracking over the horizon the way it does in early September. My brother stood in my driveway, that familiar half-smile on his face, the one that always made him look younger than his 28 years. "Just a week," he said, bouncing the keys in his palm. "My buddy's moving to Colorado, and his U-Haul fell through. You know how it is." I knew how it was. Or I thought I did. I'm a contractor, have been for 11 years now, since I was 22 and fresh out of trade school. My truck wasn't just transportation. It was my office, my workshop, my livelihood rolled into one machine. A 2019 Ford F-150, fully loaded, paid off 3 years ago after I'd scraped and saved every penny. $42,000 when I bought it. Worth every cent. "The toolboxes stay locked," I told him. "Don't let anyone mess with them." "Come on, man. Who do you think I am?" That question would haunt me later. I watched him pull out of my driveway, my grandfather's voice echoing in my head the way it always did when I saw that truck. "Take care of your tools, and they'll take care of you." The old man had taught me everything: how to frame a wall, how to read a blueprint, how to shake a client's hand and mean it. He'd passed 5 years ago, but his tools were still in my truck. His worn leather tool belt. The hand-carved mallet he'd made himself. The level he'd had since before I was born, the one with his initials scratched into the side. I gave him my keys because he's my brother. He sold my truck for $28,000, forged my signature, and disappeared. My entire livelihood was in that truck. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The first few days passed normally. I had a small bathroom renovation scheduled that week, nothing requiring heavy equipment, so I managed with my personal car and a few borrowed tools from a buddy. My brother texted me twice, once to say they'd made it to Denver, once to say the move was taking longer than expected. Might need a couple extra days. "That cool?" "Sure," I texted back. "Just let me know." That was the last time I heard from him. By day 8, my calls went straight to voicemail. By day 10, I'd driven to his apartment complex 40 minutes away, my stomach knotting tighter with every mile. The building manager met me in the parking lot, clipboard in hand, looking like a man who'd had too many difficult conversations. "Your brother?" He shook his head. "Moved out 10 days ago. Middle of the night, from what the neighbors said. Still owes me last month's rent plus the cleaning deposit." "Did he say where he was going?" "Didn't say anything. Just vanished." I stood in that empty parking spot where my brother's Civic used to sit, and I felt something cold settle into my chest. Not anger, not yet. Just the dawning realization that something was deeply, irreversibly wrong. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and resignation. The officer who took my report was a heavy-set man with kind eyes and a wedding ring that looked too tight on his finger. "Family situations are tough," he said, typing my information into his computer. "Have you checked if the vehicle's been sold?" Sold. The word didn't make sense. He borrowed it. He wouldn't. But even as I said it, I knew I was lying to myself. The officer showed me how to check the DMV records, and there it was in black and white. Title transfer, dated 2 days after my brother drove away with my keys. New owner listed. Sale price, $28,000 cash. My signature was on the paperwork. Except I'd never signed anything. "That's forgery," the officer said quietly. "That's a felony." I sat in that plastic chair, staring at the screen, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. My brother hadn't borrowed my truck. He'd stolen it. Forged my name. Sold my livelihood out from under me. And he'd taken everything with it. Update 1. The investigation, 2 weeks later. The buyer's name was in the DMV records, a 53-year-old electrician from a town 2 hours south. I called him the day after I filed the police report, my hands shaking as I dialed. "I bought that truck in good faith," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Met the guy at a coffee shop. He had all the paperwork. Bill of sale, title, registration. Seemed legit. The title was forged. My signature was forged." A long silence. Then, I paid $28,000 cash. That was my retirement savings. We were both victims now, 2 strangers connected by one betrayal. He'd lost his money. I'd lost my truck, my tools, my ability to work. The police told us both the same thing: the truck would be impounded as evidence once located, and neither of us could touch it until the case was resolved. "I'm sorry," I told him, and I meant it. "This isn't your fault." "It's not yours either," he said. "But here we are." The buyer is a victim too. He paid $28,000 cash for a stolen truck with fake paperwork. Now he's out the money and the truck. My brother didn't just steal from me, he created a chain of destruction that stretched far beyond our family. Over the next 2 weeks, I pieced together what had happened. It wasn't difficult once I started asking the right questions. My brother had left a trail of debt and desperation a mile wide. His former roommate talked first. They'd been friends since college, and he'd watched my brother's spending spiral out of control over the past 3 years. Designer clothes, he said, shaking his head. Expensive dinners. That trip to Miami last spring put the whole thing on credit cards. I tried to talk to him about it, but he always said he had it handled. He didn't have anything handled. I tracked down credit card statements through a buddy who worked in collections. $45,000 in debt, spread across 6 different cards. Minimum payments missed for months. Collection agencies calling daily. One creditor had already filed a lawsuit. He'd been living beyond his means for years. Designer clothes. Luxury apartment. Trips he couldn't afford. And when the bills came due, he stole from me. My brother hadn't borrowed my truck to help a friend move. He'd taken it because he was drowning, because the walls were closing in, because he'd built a life on credit and fantasy and the bill had finally come due. And rather than face the consequences of his own choices, he'd stolen from the one person who would have helped him if he'd just asked. That was what hurt most. Not the money. Not even the truck. The fact that he'd had options, that I would have been one of those options, and he'd chosen theft instead. Some of those tools were my grandfather's. He taught me how to be a contractor. They can't be replaced. They're gone. I made a list of everything that had been in that truck when my brother drove away. The commercial-grade tool set I'd accumulated over 11 years. The specialized equipment for tile work and finish carpentry. The safety gear, the extension cords, the 1,000 small items that made my job possible. $8,000 in tools. Give or take. But the number didn't capture the real loss. My grandfather's hand-carved mallet, the one he'd made from a piece of oak he'd salvaged from his father's barn. The leather tool belt, worn soft from decades of use, still carrying the faint smell of sawdust and honest work. The level with his initials scratched into the side. CM, for Charles Morrison, the one he'd placed in my hands when I was 16 and told me, "This is yours now. Take care of it." Those tools were my inheritance. Not in the legal sense. My grandfather hadn't had much money when he passed, but in every sense that mattered. They were the physical proof that he'd lived, that he'd taught me, that everything I'd built since then rested on the foundation of his knowledge and his love. My brother had sold them for a fraction of their worth. Dumped them with the truck, probably. Hadn't thought twice about what they meant. I called my parents the night I made that list. I thought they'd understand. I thought they'd be as horrified as I was. I was wrong. Update 2. Family lines, 1 month later. He was desperate. My mother's voice crackled through the phone, that familiar mix of pleading and judgment that I'd grown up with. You don't know what he's been going through. I know exactly what he's been going through. He was spending money he didn't have on a lifestyle he couldn't afford. And when it caught up with him, he stole my truck. He didn't steal it. He borrowed it. Things just got complicated. He forged my signature, Mom. That's a felony. He sold my truck to a stranger for cash. That stranger is now out $28,000. This isn't complicated. This is criminal. A long pause. I could hear my father in the background, his voice low and angry, though I couldn't make out the words. Your father thinks you should drop this, my mother finally said. He's your brother. Family doesn't involve the police in family matters. Parents said, he was desperate, he's your brother. I'm desperate too. I can't work without my truck. But somehow I'm the bad guy for calling the police. I'd been borrowing equipment from other contractors for a month. Taking smaller jobs, the ones that didn't require heavy lifting or specialized tools. Watching my savings dwindle while I waited for the insurance company to process a claim they clearly didn't want to pay. I can't work, I told my mother. Do you understand that? My business is dying. Every day I can't work is money I'm losing. And you want me to just let this go? He's your brother. He stopped being my brother when he forged my signature and stole everything I've built. My mother started crying. My father grabbed the phone and told me I was tearing the family apart. I hung up and sat in the dark of my empty workshop, surrounded by the tools I'd managed to borrow, and I wondered how I'd become the villain in my own story. The detective assigned to my case was a woman named Martinez, mid-40s, with the tired efficiency of someone who'd seen too much and still showed up every day anyway. Your brother's credit cards were used in New Mexico 3 weeks ago, she told me during our second meeting. Small purchases. Gas stations, mostly. He's moving around, trying to stay invisible. Can you find him? We're working on it. The forgery charge is solid. We've got handwriting analysis that confirms he signed your name. Once we locate him, we can issue a warrant. And the truck? Still missing. Whoever bought it from him might have resold it by now. Or it could be in a chop shop. We're looking. I nodded, though something in my chest felt hollow. Even if they found the truck, my grandfather's tools were probably gone forever. Sold at some pawn shop for a fraction of what they were worth. Sitting in a stranger's garage. Thrown away. Detective Martinez must have seen something in my face, because her voice softened slightly. I know this is hard, she said. But we're building a solid case. When we find him, he's going to face real consequences. I don't want him to suffer, I said, and I wasn't sure if I was lying or not. I don't know. I want to understand why. People do desperate things when they're drowning. Doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it okay. But sometimes that's the only explanation there is. Update 3. The trail, 3 months later. The insurance claim was a nightmare. My policy covered theft, but the circumstances were complicated, their word, not mine. I'd willingly given my brother the keys. He'd had a spare from the previous year. The title had been transferred through what appeared to be legal channels, even if those channels involved forgery. We need the police report finalized, the adjuster told me during our 4th phone call. We need confirmation that this was theft and not a civil matter. He forged my signature. How is that not theft? I understand your frustration, sir. But our investigation requires. I stopped listening. They were going to drag this out as long as possible, hoping I'd give up, hoping the case would stall, hoping they could avoid paying $42,000 to a contractor who'd been stupid enough to trust his brother. Meanwhile, I was barely scraping by. The smaller jobs covered my bills, mostly, but my reputation was suffering. Clients who'd booked me for larger projects had to find other contractors. Word got around that I was having equipment problems. In a business built on reliability, that kind of word could be fatal. The civil suit came from an unexpected direction. The buyer, the electrician who'd paid cash for my stolen truck, hired a lawyer. He wasn't suing me. He was suing my brother, filing a civil complaint for fraud and seeking full restitution of his $28,000 plus legal fees. I know he's your family, the buyer told me when he called to let me know. But I worked 30 years for that money. I can't just walk away. I don't blame you, I said. I hope you get every penny back. You should file too. Join the civil suit. If we both come after him, it'll be harder for him to hide. I thought about it for a long time after we hung up. My brother was already facing criminal charges. Adding a civil suit felt like piling on, like kicking a man when he was down. But then I thought about my grandfather's tools. About the 11 years I'd spent building my business. About the 8 months of struggle and borrowed equipment and lost contracts and sleepless nights. I called a lawyer the next morning. Update 4. The arrest, 4 months later. They found him in Arizona. My brother had been working under a fake name at a construction company, irony thick enough to choke on, when one of his co-workers recognized him from a news report. The co-worker called the tip line. The police moved fast. I got the call from Detective Martinez on a Thursday afternoon. We've got him in custody, she said. He's being processed for extradition now. Should be back in state within 2 weeks. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat down on my front porch and stared at nothing for a very long time. 4 months. That's how long my brother had been running, hiding, pretending he could outrun the consequences of what he'd done. 4 months of my life spent fighting insurance companies and rebuilding from scratch and explaining to clients why I couldn't take their jobs. 4 months of phone calls from my parents, each one more desperate than the last, begging me to drop the charges, to forgive, to forget. He's your brother, my mother had said just last week. What will people think if you send your own brother to prison? They'll think he committed crimes, I told her. And they'll be right. The extradition took 10 days. My brother was booked into the county jail on charges of grand theft auto, forgery, and fraud. His bail was set at $50,000, more than he could pay, especially now that all his credit was destroyed. My parents called me that night, both of them on the line, their voices overlapping in that frantic way that meant they'd been arguing for hours. You have to help him, my father said. He's your brother. He made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. A mistake is bouncing a check. He stole my truck. He forged my signature. He sold everything I had and ran away. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. He was desperate. We're all desperate sometimes. We don't all steal from our families. My mother was crying again. Please, she said. Just talk to him. Just listen to what he has to say. I thought about it. Part of me wanted to look him in the eye, to ask him why, to try to understand how the kid I'd grown up with had turned into someone capable of this kind of betrayal. But a bigger part of me knew that nothing he said would change anything. The truck was gone. The tools were gone. My grandfather's legacy was scattered to the winds, sold for pennies on the dollar by a man who never appreciated what he was destroying. No, I said. He made his choice. Now he gets to live with it. I hung up and turned off my phone. I didn't turn it back on for 3 days. Update 5. The Reckoning, 8 months later. The trial took place on a gray morning in May, almost exactly 8 months after my brother had driven away with my keys. He looked different, thinner, paler, his designer clothes replaced by the orange jumpsuit of a county inmate. His lawyer had tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecution wasn't interested. The evidence was too solid. The forgery was documented. The trail of theft and fraud was clear as day. I testified for 2 hours. I talked about the truck, about my business, about the 11 years I'd spent building something from nothing. I talked about my grandfather's tools, about what they meant to me, about how some losses can't be measured in dollars and cents. My brother never looked at me. Not once. The buyer testified too. He talked about his retirement savings, about the trust he'd placed in a stranger who turned out to be a thief, about the months he'd spent fighting to recover money that should never have been taken from him in the first place. My parents sat in the gallery, their faces drawn and gray. They'd stopped calling me by then, stopped trying to convince me to drop the charges. I think they finally understood that nothing they said would change my mind, or maybe they just ran out of arguments. Either way, the silence was almost peaceful. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. The judge was a stern woman in her 60s who'd clearly seen enough of my brother's type to know exactly what she was dealing with. You had opportunities, she told him. You had family who would have helped you. And instead of asking for help, you chose to steal. You chose to forge. You chose to run. Those choices have consequences. 3 years in state prison. My brother's head dropped when the sentence was read. Behind me, I heard my mother let out a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. My father put his arm around her, and for a moment, I almost felt something. Almost. But then I thought about my grandfather's mallet. About the level with his initials scratched into the side. About the leather tool belt that smelled like sawdust and honest work. Those things were gone forever. No prison sentence could bring them back. The insurance company finally paid out 3 weeks after the sentencing, $42,000, minus deductibles and depreciation and all the other ways they'd found to chip away at what they owed me. It wasn't everything I'd lost, but it was enough to start over. I bought a new truck, a 2024 F-150, same color as the old one. Loaded it up with new tools, everything I needed to get back to work at full capacity. The business started recovering almost immediately. Clients who'd gone elsewhere started coming back. Word got around that my equipment problems were solved. The civil suit went forward too. The buyer and I both received judgments against my brother, a combined total of nearly $80,000. We'll probably never see most of it. You can't squeeze blood from a stone, and my brother will be paying off his debts for the rest of his life. But the judgments are on the record. They'll follow him forever. I replaced most of what I lost. Better tools, in some cases. Modern equipment that makes my job easier. But I couldn't replace the things that mattered most. My grandfather's mallet is gone. His level is gone. The leather tool belt he wore every day for 40 years is somewhere out there in the world, if it wasn't thrown away. Some losses can't be measured in insurance claims. Final update. 1 year later. It's been a year now since my brother drove away with my keys. I haven't spoken to my parents in 6 months. They made their choice when they defended him over me, when they made me the villain for protecting myself. I don't hate them. I'm not sure I'm capable of hating the people who raised me, but I can't pretend that things are okay between us. Some wounds don't heal just because time passes. My brother wrote me a letter from prison. 3 pages, handwritten, full of apologies and explanations and promises to make things right. I read it once, then I put it in a drawer and haven't looked at it since. Maybe someday I'll forgive him. Maybe time will soften the edges of what he did, make it easier to remember the kid who used to follow me around the job site, asking questions about every tool and technique. Maybe I'll visit him, talk to him, try to understand what went wrong in his head that he thought stealing from me was his only option. But that day isn't today. And it won't be tomorrow. People ask me sometimes if I regret pressing charges. If I wish I'd handled it differently, kept it in the family, found some other way to resolve things. The answer is no. My brother made a choice. He chose to build a lifestyle he couldn't afford. He chose to ignore the debt mounting around him. He chose to steal from me rather than ask for help. He chose to forge my signature, sell my truck, take my grandfather's tools, and run away like a coward. He chose a lifestyle he couldn't afford and paid for it by stealing from family. Some choices have consequences. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. I didn't create those consequences. I just refused to protect him from them. I drive past my old neighborhood sometimes, the one where we grew up. The house looks smaller than I remember, the way childhood places always do when you see them as an adult. I think about the two boys who used to play in that backyard, building forts out of scrap lumber, pretending to be contractors like our grandfather. Those boys are gone now. One of them grew up and built a life with his own hands. The other one tried to take a shortcut and destroyed everything instead. He's my brother by blood, but family doesn't steal from family. That bridge is burned. I have a new truck now. New tools. A business that's thriving despite everything. I wake up every morning and go to work and build things with my hands, the way my grandfather taught me. The way I'll keep doing until I can't anymore. Some things can be replaced. Some things can't. And some things, some people, you just have to let go. Last week, I found an old photograph in a box in my closet. My grandfather and me, standing next to his truck, his arm around my shoulders. I was maybe 10 years old. We were both smiling. I keep that photograph on my dashboard now. It's the only piece of him I have left. But it's enough. Here's what I learned. Some people will take shortcuts and destroy everything. Some bridges you can't rebuild. Family doesn't steal from family. I gave him my keys because he's my brother. He sold my truck for $28,000, forged my signature, and disappeared. My entire livelihood was in that truck. Some of those tools were my grandfather's. He taught me how to be a contractor. They can't be replaced. They're gone. Parents said, he was desperate, he's your brother. I'm desperate too. I can't work without my truck. But somehow I'm the bad guy for calling the police. He'd been living beyond his means for years. Designer clothes. Luxury apartment. Trips he couldn't afford. And when the bills came due, he stole from me. The buyer is a victim too. He paid $28,000 cash for a stolen truck with fake paperwork. Now he's out the money and the truck. They found him in Arizona after 4 months. Arrested. Extradited. Trial. Guilty on all counts. 3 years in prison. Parents begged me to drop charges. I said, he didn't steal a truck. He stole my business, my tools, my grandfather's legacy. He made his choice. Insurance paid after 8 months. Bought new truck, replaced tools. Except grandfather's, can't replace those. He wrote me from prison. 3 pages of apologies. I read it once, put it in a drawer. He chose a lifestyle he couldn't afford and paid for it by stealing from family. Some choices have consequences. Some bridges can't be rebuilt. He's my brother by blood, but family doesn't steal from family. That bridge is burned.